This is Matthew McConaughey.
Natalie Portman.
James Patterson.
Michael Ian Black.
And you are listening to
Five Questions
with Dan
Schawbel.
Natasha, welcome to Five Questions.
Great to be here.
How did all your childhood jobs shape who you are as a professional today?
I do talk about that. My husband always says when you talk about your childhood, you sound like Cinderella. Because I did work in a grocery store and have a paper route and work at the JCC snack bar and babysat. I catered weddings. I just had so many jobs. I think, as I have a child now and I'll try to get her to just like take her dish from the table into the sink and she won't do it. It's very challenging for me because I do remember I was like always cleaning. I used to have to edge the lawn. Do you know what that means? Like you have to do it.
Maybe I'm happy I don't know, or maybe I will have to do that in the future.
Basically the grass will grow onto the sidewalks. You have this maybe they have a electronic way to do it, but when I was young, you had this like rotary rake thing that had like a razor and you would have to edge the grass off of the sidewalk. So I suppose it made me appreciate my free time maybe that I have now when I'm able to do that, to have free time. I think that, it also has given me a good work ethic. When I started stand up, I was, very determined that I had to work really hard. So I remember I had like a little diary and I would keep track of the amount of shows I would do each week. And I would keep trying to I would tally them up at the end of the week. So if I did 7 shows one week, then the next week I'd be like, okay, I have to do at least 7 shows. So then at the end of the month, I would tally up. And I think I wanted to be getting up at least 30 times a month. And I think that, having to work as a child, not a child, but, since you're a teen or whatever, it really did help me figure out how to manage my time and work hard and not be afraid of working hard because the results aren't immediate. And I think you just have to put the time in.
Definitely. And I mean, one of the things that I would take away from that is you have a certain appreciation for where you are now because of where you've been and the work you've put in. And, you're not better, than anyone, right? Meaning like you started just doing these type of jobs and it's kind of grown and, one job to the next job to the next job. And similar to, trying to be a successful comedian, you're just kind of bouncing around from the next gig to the next gig to the next gig. And you're not kind of better than anything. Like you could speak to, or do stand up to 20 people, right? Or 50 people, right? Like everyone starts somewhere.
Exactly. And I think that, along the way, having worked so many menial jobs, it does give you perspective for people and their jobs. And, I think Todd Glass said that he, never ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself, So I think that's a really good edict for when you're, coming up through the trenches. And additionally, it's not how people treat you. It's like, how do they treat the garbage men or how do they treat the assistants? And I think that just being aware of all of those things, having worked so many different types of jobs, it really does kind of help you open your mind and develop more empathy for people who are working jobs that, you're interacting with people all the time.
Absolutely. And there's a ton of comedians. What do you think has made you stand out from everyone else and kept you inspired and driven since you started your career?
What made me stand out? I guess when I started, about 3 years after I started comedy, I was like, I'm just going to dress up. Like someone in an acting class, there was a little saying up on the wall and it said, if you dress like the audience, you become one of them. And that really had an effect on me. And I was like, right, I need to I'm the one they're going to be listening to when they come for this half hour or whatever. So I'm going to dress the part. And I think that that kind of psychologically helped me in performance. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but that was just my approach. And then additionally, I felt that if I dressed up and maybe even had like gloves on and glamorous jacket, and I just sort of could get away with more because people didn't see me necessarily as just like some girl who lives in LA who's like complaining about things. It was more like, oh, maybe she's like a little bit of a heightened character. And then I could kind of, like I said, get away with a little more.
Definitely. And it's probably about relatability. And if everyone's dressing the same, like think about Lady Gaga. She clearly dressed different than anyone probably ever has in entertainment. And that, of course, there was some defined talent there, but that probably helped her stand out as well.
Yeah, and I have to say too, it was organic on my behalf because like I have always been interested in clothing and dressing in a certain way, and so I don't think it was like manipulative necessarily. It was just like a natural. I also think I was afraid to dress too over the top when I started because I didn't want to bomb in a costume. So when you're first starting out, it's good to just be dressed a little like under the radar. So if you have to slip out of the club, you can.
I feel like most of the comedians I talk to bomb when they first start out anyways.
Exactly. I mean, I think a lot of people were lucky like me, like they had an amazing set their first time. It's almost like a little luck or a little bit of a fluke because you aren't expecting them to laugh. And so then when they do, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this. That's what happened to me. And then the second time I got on stage, I was like, had a big head. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And of course, it ended in me face planted on my bed that night, being like, okay, this is going to take a while.
Can only imagine. And how did you come up with the book title, The World Deserves My Children? And what do you hope people get out of it?
Well, it's a comedy book, so it's definitely comedic stories. But they're all about my journey of motherhood, and there's so much new technology in terms of like freezing your eggs and all the different things that are available to women to have babies later in life. And I didn't really understand it all when I was going through my journey, and so I felt like I wanted to talk about that and all of the kind of details that I went through, but in a comedic way. And the title, "The World Deserves My Children," it was sort of, after you write about things from a lot of different angles, you start to realize, like, for me personally, I was like, it kind of happened when Trump was elected, and I was like, oh, I have these egg babies on ice, but I don't think I'm going to have kids. Like, if this is how the world is going to be. And then, after really meditating on it and thinking about it, I started to realize, you can't, the dumb people can't be the only people having kids. And,
Well, there is a movie called Idiocracy.
I know. I loved that movie. It had like a real effect on me when I first saw it. But yeah, maybe it's because of that. But it's like, is it fair to the kid to bring them up in this world that coastal change will be inevitable in their lifetimes, and there's racial inequality, and it's so much vitriol, and AI is going to take over, and are the kids going to get on Instagram and have body image issues when they're 10? There's just so many things happening, and you're like, oh, COVID, there's just like so many things, and you're like, is it fair to bring a child into this world?
Gun violence. I mean, there's so many things, Natasha. I mean,
I know. So
and the thing is, a lot of my friends, you wrote a book basically, with your humor, but a lot of my friends are thinking the same thing.
They're thinking, why should I have a kid? And, when I had my kid, I was contemplating all of these things too. You don't want them to be mad at you. And, why did you bring me into this world? But I have to say, like, it's been for me personally, like, just such an amazing experience to have a kid, and just, it's really is kind of magical, and you just try to instill in them everything you can, and hopefully they will be a part of the world in a good way. And maybe they'll be the next Greta Thunberg. Or, I mean, that's all you can really hope, and just try to instill in them tenets of nonviolence and equality, and try to make them as good, caring, empathetic people who care about their rights and believe in science. And I'm hoping that that will be a good thing, and I'm not just like trying to make her part of my liberal army.
Now you just gotta hope she has the right peer group as she's growing up.
Exactly. I guess that's what it is. I know, because my husband, he kind of became a drug addict by the time he was 15. And, he says, like, I just remember sitting on stoops and like not having much to do. And, you just like meet the wrong kids, and then all of a sudden you're like on drugs. So, not that it's bad to be on drugs, but I would hope that my child wouldn't be on drugs before their brain is completely developed.
That's important. What do you say are the biggest challenges parenting during these chaotic and uncertain times, and how have you dealt with them? Because I think we're going to be uncertainty for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that for me, it's just been my biggest personal struggle is not being afraid of everything. And I think I talk about it in the book a little bit because, I just, above anything, is like, how do I just keep this person safe and healthy and, beyond myself and my needs, and, and okay, now there's COVID. And if I bring her for a haircut, is that potentially, could she get long COVID and never be able to smell again? And, letting your mind go into these like, I'm taking her to the grocery store. Is this irresponsible of me as a mother? And, just questioning yourself constantly, and just being in this like state of fear over everything. Am I doing something to her brain because I give her the iPad, but I need a break and I don't have childcare? And, it's like, I'm trying to just know that, I'm making these decisions. I'm making the best decisions I can out of love. And I'm lucky that I have a partner who sees things in a slightly different way, so we can have some kind of balance. Like, he's always trying to make sure that our family is having fun. And I'm like, okay, well, that's good, because I'm just trying to keep us safe. But just trying to get a little bit more of his energy, in terms of like not always being afraid of like, what's the worst thing that can happen in this moment during this excursion, and how am I going to prevent it or handle it when it comes? Just instead of having my mind go 100% there all the time, I'm just trying to relax a little bit and enjoy the moment, because I know these years, my kid's already 5, so I know they go by so fast.
And we still have to live life. I was in Las Vegas, and the driver who was driving me to the airport was like, did you know that the person who killed like 60 people in Las Vegas as they were walking down the street took a shot from your hotel? I'm like, oh my God. Like, I feel like some of this stuff is inescapable, because it's not just, struggles like internally that people have, obviously, mental health and all these things, but it's also externally. I mean, you just go on social media, like you were saying before, or you watch the news, or you're just like living life, and someone says something like, it's just, it is definitely a tough world. But at the same time, as you were saying, you just kind of have to live life at the same time. What, are you never going to go outside again?
I know, and it's challenging because you want to give your kid experiences and teach them like joie de vivre, and you don't want them to be afraid of life. And in one chapter of my book, I do interview my husband, and he said something really interesting that I had never really thought of before, which is like, if you're in a constant state of fear that something's going to happen to your child, there's no way that kid is not picking up on that. Yeah. And, I think a lot of our parents, at least my mom, and my grandma, they were too busy to like be that worried about every single kid. My Nana had like 7 kids, and she would just get on a train from New Orleans to Chicago with 7 children. It's like, I would definitely lose a child. Like, if I'm just trying to like get on a plane with my kid, it's super challenging.
I think I would like forget their names if there were 7 of them together.
And my mom, she had 3 kids and she was alone, and I think that when you're in this survival mode, you don't have this luxury of time to like worry about every single potential disaster that could happen. So, I do think that just really the only thing you can do is just try to strengthen your mind and not let the fear take over.
Absolutely. And what's your best piece of career advice?
Well, it doesn't take 10 years. It takes more than that. That used to be a thing they always said. My best piece of career advice, I think, the thing that really helped me, since my career is specifically stand up, I would say 2 things. One thing is when I went to do stand up at the Comedy Store, I would go every Sunday until Mitzi Shore would come to, let you know if you were going to be a paid regular or not. But there was a little sign at the sign up that said, you don't have to be funny for 3 minutes. You just have to be yourself. And that was really instructive for me, because you would worry so much about what you were saying all the time. And is it going to be funny? Is it going to be funny? And then it's like, well, there is a little bit, you just have to kind of ease into like who you are and let it sort of happen. And the other bit of advice when I started out stand up was from Bobby Lee. And he said, try to make them laugh before you start talking. So I think that is a similar idea in the sense like getting up on stage and it's like, how can I be funny with who I am and what I'm doing, not just like the jokes I have prepared. So, when I started, I would just sort of like grab the mic, and I'm really short, so I'd have to like pull it down really far, and then I would just do a little bit of physical comedy. And it was always fun to try to see like, oh, how can I get them to laugh with my body? Because I love physical comedy. And yeah, just opening up the aperture of your mind, like what is comedy? How can I be funny using everything, not just these jokes that you've written?
Yeah, and by making people laugh really early on before you even get on stage and start your bit, that gives you a level of confidence, and you get to kind of test things out to the audience to get a feel for them as well. So that's really smart. I've never heard that before from a comedian.
Oh, I'm so glad I gave you something you didn't hear before. I was going to talk about make sure you follow your passion.
Yeah. I've only heard that for 10 years before I told people to stop saying it.
Not everyone should follow their passion. How about that?
That's true. Yeah. Passion could lead you to potentially homelessness.
Right. Delusion.
Exactly. Well, that's great advice. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And thanks for reading the book.